Hey guys, just before we begin, I'd like to say that this video was decided by you, the viewers. In future, consider joining my Patreon if you want to decide the direction this channel should go in, where you, alongside other patrons like Cameron Strauss, Cool Cookie and Echolocation, can also get a shout out at the start of videos. Check out the link in the description below. So, we're finally back to covering a Tales game. See, I told you I'd be back. Today we'll be covering a game which I have very much been keen to play since it got its fan translation. Back during the main series Retrospective, I was really enthralled by Tales of Innocence seemingly cramming a full 3D Tales game onto the DS system. However, despite being amazed, as I played through the game, its flaws did come somewhat noticeable, and today I consider it to be one of the more weaker entries in the series, even though I still think it's reasonably good. However, Tales of Innocence is still a really unique title, with its concepts of reincarnation and the whole late 1800s Industrial Revolution setting. Thus, I was really keen to try out the game's 2012 Vita remake. Being on a much more powerful system than the DS, can this remake solve my issues with the DS original? So let's dive into Tales of Innocence R for the PlayStation Vita. As I mentioned in several of the main series Tales retrospectives, the late 2000s were a real golden age for the Tales series, with the Namco Tales Studio releasing at least one mainline game every year alongside multiple spin-offs and remakes. One of the biggest systems to get spin-offs and remakes was the PlayStation Portable, which had gotten a ton of side games despite not getting any original titles. Thus, with the announcement of the PlayStation Vita in 2011, it made sense to continue this practice of ports and spin-offs for the new system. When it came to deciding what game to make for the PlayStation Vita, producer Ryuji Odate, who had overseen multiple Tales games in the PSP, was keen to remake Tales of Innocence due to the large amount of feedback from fans. Despite developers' alpha systems trying to do their best to fit a Tales game on the DS, it was clear that Innocence had come up short compared to other titles, with it lacking in visuals and content compared to the console entries. Thus, with a massive uptick in power, the Vita offered the chance to make a definitive version for Tales of Innocence. Odate would take on the role as producing this game after overseeing the 2007 original release. However, as for the developer, Odate would call on the help of Seventh Chord, instead of the original developers of Alpha Systems. Seventh Chord was a small development team who had previously worked with the Namco Tales Studio on the DS game Carrero RPG, which, due to its similarities in gameplay with the Tales series, had led to some to unofficially call it the fourth DS Tales game. Development for the game would see the team develop the game from scratch, with the team not using any of the game's original source code. The late Mutsumi Inamata would also be brought back to help in the development of several new characters who had been added to the story, including 2 totally new playable characters, increasing the cast up to 8 playable characters. Tales of Innocence R, as it would come to be called, would be announced on the PlayStation Vita at the 2011 Tokyo Game Show, alongside the PSP spin-off game Tales of Heroes Twin Brave. The R in the game's name would stand for reimagination, to indicate to the world that this was not just a simple remake of the DS original. With the Vita set to release in Japan in December, the team also hoped to benefit from being one of the first RPGs to launch on the system. Tales of Innocence R would eventually come out in Japan on the 26th of January 2012, just over a month from the Vita's Japanese launch, and almost a month before the system's Western debut. Despite a lot of global fan interest, the team decided against the localization of the game due to concerns of low sales. Key Tales producer Hideo Baba did raise the prospect of localizing the game if the latter sales of Tales of Hearts R sold well, however it clearly didn't reach their intended sales goals, and Tales of Innocence R would remain a Japanese exclusive, like the DS original. However, like the DS original, Tales of Innocence R would get a fan translation by the team at Live Bottle Productions, who were also responsible for the Tales of Destiny Director's Cut translation. The project would begin in early 2021 with a simple script translation, and the team were quickly able to develop a full solid English build of the game by mid-2022. Some massive credit needs to go to the team at Lifebottle Productions, who were also nice enough to chat with me on Discord to help me develop the script for this retrospective. So without further ado, let's get into the game. Straight from the get-go, Tales of Innocence R brings us the HD visuals that the DS original could never have pulled off. Character models are now much more detailed and have some pretty in-depth cutscenes with advanced character movement. While the improved visuals are great, I unfortunately wouldn't say I'm blown away by them. In fact, I'd say Tales of Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss are better looking games despite being on a system far weaker than the Vita. Perhaps I'm overstating the Vita's capabilities, but at the same time, I've played games like God Eater and the Legend of Heroes games and they seem far more graphically impressive for the Vita. Despite my disappointment in the graphics, one thing I do like is the introduction of anime cutscenes in the game done by Production IG, and not just a few cutscenes either. The game has a ton of 2D anime cutscenes, way more than the 10 or so seen in most mainline games. Pretty much every character is introduced with one of these anime scenes, and it kinda makes me wish we got a Tales of Innocence anime. Speaking of character interactions, we now have two brand new characters in Contiue and Contiue Selezneva, who, unlike other party members, are not reincarnations of gods, but are instead extra-dimensional beings who have arrived in this world in order to complete important missions. These missions end up being the focal point of the game's additional story content, with the rest of the plot sticking pretty close to the original DS game's story, outside a couple of scenes playing out slightly differently. Speaking of the additional content, the game does add a handful of new dungeons, often in the form of forests and passes which the party now needs to traverse through in order to reach their destination. These new dungeons have unfortunately, or fortunately depending on who you ask, have come at the cost of the guild dungeons. While the guilds still exist in towns, they no longer task you with quests and simply just sell your items at the cost of grade. We also have the introduction of the Wonder Chef from the old Team Symphonia games, who teaches the party new recipes. However, one change I really do not like is the removal of contact encounters. To be honest, I just find it extremely weird how the Tales of the World games on PSP had contact encounters, yet this game doesn't. I don't know why this quality of life system was removed. What makes this removal even worse is the fact that Tales of Innocence R keeps the really long dungeons from the first game, meaning you'll be constantly getting into tons of fights, which, speaking about that, for combat, Tales of Innocence R brings us the direct interaction linear motion battle system, which in a lot of ways doesn't differ too much from the dimensional stride linear motion battle system of the original game. Once again, we're back to the classic 3D combat of regular attacks into base arts and then master arts. As someone who's spent the last year playing all the recent entries, I kind of forgot how much I missed the classic combat system. There's just something so fun about figuring out the best combination of arts to stun-lock an enemy over simply just attacking with whatever attacks you have until your arbitrary gauge runs out. While the game sticks to the classic combat of the Team Symphonia games, it does bring the unique system of toggling freerun via switching between the D-pad and analog stick, rather than using a shoulder button. This movement style had been in place on the PSP with the Tales of the World games, and it works alright, although it can still be a bit janky to have to keep moving your thumb mid-combat. Outside of the small combat tweaks, Tales of Innocence R also tweaks some of the game's unique combat quirks. Like last time, we once again had the style system, although this time it consists of a giant chart in which ability points, or AP, can be spent to buy skills, which can then be attached to the cost of skill points, or SP. We also have the return of the awakening system in the new Rave gauge. This time, the gauge is now a party-wide gauge filled up by continuously attacking the enemy and will net the party combat bonuses if it reaches select levels. It can also work to power up mystic arts. The Rave gauge can also be greatly filled up by performing guard counters. When comboing into enemies, some will occasionally break out of the combo and begin to glow red in order to perform a counterattack. When this happens, you'll be able to perform a guard counter by perfectly timing a block to match their attack. In doing so, you will negate the counter and perform your own attack, thus allowing you to continue the combo. Alongside the returning systems, we also have the new overlimit system, which works similar to how it did in games like Tales of the Abyss, in which each party member has their own gauge and can go into overlimit at the press of a button. The benefits of overlimit can vary depending on the different skills selected, but generally work to boost your character's stats and offensive capabilities. Speaking about the characters individually, they, for the most part, are almost identical to the DS versions, thus let's talk about the newcomers. Contiue is a pure magical fighter, lacking the physical arts of the game's normal spellcasters like Iria and Unge. As for his regular attacks, Contiue sprouts up magical swords wherever the enemy is, making him great at distance attacks. Meanwhile, as for his spells, he uniquely learns them via getting hit by them. This means Contiue can learn almost every spell in the game, making him an incredibly powerful character. It sucks, however, that Contiue hasn't been given the same treatment. While her double-bladed spear is a unique weapon, she possesses no unique abilities and is instead limited to one of the smallest art pools in Tales history. Thus her only redeeming ability is being a solid air fighter with a bunch of decent aerial arts and decent combo potential. Like last time, Kazuhiro Nakamura returns in order to remix his own tracks as well as add a couple of new tracks for the game. In general, Tales of Innocence R's remixes are in my mind superior pieces compared to the DS original, with a big highlight for me being the boss theme Crush with the Sword. That opening 20 seconds is one of my favourite starts to any boss theme. As for voice acting, we also have the original voice actors returning and adding in a ton more dialogue lines. Thanks to the increased memory size afforded by PS Vita games, we now have way more voice acting throughout the game. However, a large chunk of the skits do still remain voiceless, likely due to the returning dialogue response options causing skits to have different response paths. Finally, I guess I should talk about the new opening song. While players will initially be met with the DS original anime opening, upon starting a new game, players will soon be faced with a brand new opening done by Production IG and utilising the widescreen display of the PlayStation Vita. This new opening is complemented by the brand new song New Day New Life, performed once again by Kokia. Now, while the original opening has grown on me, I cannot argue that the Vita's opening is anything but a far superior opening with better music, visuals and action scenes. And like with Tales of Xillia's OP, this OP was one of the biggest driving factors getting me to pick up and play this game. For the most part, Tales of Innocence R is an improvement over the DS original, with its improved character models and town/dungeon designs. In general, if I was to recommend a version of Tales of Innocence to play, I'd definitely recommend this game over the DS one, even though the DS version's a bit easier to get working due to the complexities of Vita hacking and emulation. While I consider this version of Tales of Innocence to be the superior game, it's not as if I did have a couple of issues with the reimagining. Arguably the biggest issue for me has to be the abandonment of contact encounters. Combine this with the return of Innocence's long dungeons, and I frequently find myself stuck in so many fights that I quickly grew sick of the combat system. Speaking of the combat system, perhaps it's me, but the combat system doesn't feel quite right to me. The original game was built around getting fast flurry combos going. However, here the characters can feel very sluggish, especially with the time delay and back and front stepping, making both actions feel useless. I also have to complain about the guard counters because, for the love of me, I cannot seem to pull them off. I stop the combo and engage in the block, but it frequently fails to do anything, resulting in the enemy often breaking my guard and quickly finishing me off due to the characters being squishy once again. In general, I didn't quite have the same level of fun as I did with other games using the classic 3D combat system. Looking at Tales of Innocence R as a standalone game, I definitely think this game is up there with my other B tier entries, being a good yet not incredible entry, along the likes of Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Destiny 2. While I love this game's story and to a lesser extent characters, its gameplay unfortunately doesn't quite have the same hook as the series' best entries, and this lack of a hook which keeps me from truly loving this game. With Tales of Innocence R paving the way for Tales games on the Vita, it would only be a matter of time before we'd see the next game on the system, which is what I'll talk about soon as I look back on 2013's Tales of Hearts R for the PlayStation Vita.